Hello and welcome to the Aid Station. I'm Chris Robb, and today hugely excited to be heading to Chicago where we meet Mike Nishi, partner Chicago Event Management. So great to see you, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you too, Chris. And that was a fast commute there. So I think we're connected at very high speeds.
Absolutely, we came across on Supersonic, and we've seen each other quite regularly on Zoom and various calls. And you've been a great supporter over the last few years. I've learned so much from you, and had the wonderful opportunity to visit you in Chicago last year for the marathon, which was an incredible experience. And obviously, lots has changed since then. But why don't we start by just a little bit of your background, please?
Sure. And I know you've heard a lot about my background, so I apologize for having to drag you through that again. But
No
as you know,
worries.
I started my first taste of the marathon years and years ago. My first taste of the Chicago Marathon specifically was back in 1979. It was the third running of the Chicago Marathon back then, and at a whim, I was 13 years old, and I was only supposed to run the first, 6 miles or 10K of the course. And at that time, we lived right near that point, so I was going to shower, change, and meet my mom at the finish line. But then I just got sucked in, as you can imagine, and got pulled along, and here I am, 13-year-old kid with all these grown-ups. And again, granted, this is a time before age limits, and so they would stop and walk with me and keep encouraging me. Then you get to a point on the course where it's like, okay, how am I going to get home? I have no way back. So I just kept running. And that was my first experience with the marathon. So it took me a little bit of time, but I made it to the finish. And then after that, it's just like loved running, obviously, and loved the event. Just being pulled and just knowing, how that can change, and the people around you that didn't even know you that wanted to encourage you and push you and pull you along. And then through high school in in the early 80s, I was working as a gopher for the company that owned the rights to the marathon. So go for this, go for that, move this, move that. So whatever I could do to stay involved in the summertime, and is almost like an intern, but truly a gopher, just running around doing whatever I possibly could. And then the company in 1989 gave me an opportunity to work full time. And that's when Kerry Pinkowski, the executive race director, and I started working together. In 89, he was still kind of volunteering and focused on a lot of the community outreach work. Then they named him race director in 1990. And that's when we started really working close together. And then I worked working with him and under him. And again, back then, we only had, maybe, if you could rub it all together, maybe 5,000 participants. So it was only two of us really manning the marathon. And then, fast forward, 1993, that company sold the rights to the marathon to another group, and Carrie and I came along as the institutional knowledge holders. And then they sold the rights to, at that time, LaSalle Bank in March 20th, 1996. And that's when Carrie and I basically became partners, formed Chicago Event Management to run the property for LaSalle Bank. And then in 2007, Bank of America acquires LaSalle Bank, and then that's who we report to now. So major jumps there, but that's how I got my beginning. And as you can hear, I started with the marathon and haven't left. So I'm still going. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and I'm still running. It's taken me a lot longer. It's taken me longer these days to run, but it's been, a part of my life, and everything, and my friends and my family, and my wife. It's all because of running, and it's all folded into the fabric of, who I am, and what I do.
That's amazing. I wasn't aware of you running it as a
Oh,
13-year-old, so that's a wonderful story. It's yeah, and so inspiring what our event does for people, or what our industry does for people, and there's so many stories like that around. But wonderful to hear that. Thanks for sharing. And I guess maybe fast forward, you kind of got to where you are now. But what's things like in Chicago now? You've obviously just recently made the what I'm sure was a massively challenging decision to have to cancel. And what's the focus at the moment? What's life like in Chicago at the moment?
I think that those are great questions, and I wish I could say it's wonderful and cheery and everything else. And of course, we've tried to find those moments, especially for our family, in the place and our environment at home. And hope is keeping us, focused and driving us forward. As you mentioned, we had to make the difficult decision to cancel our events this year, in particular the marathon coming up in the fall. Obviously, very difficult decisions to get to that point, but an important one, and one that we know that was the right decision to make. As you might be aware, with everything else that's happening, not just the pandemic, but in our city specifically, we've had a lot of violence, civil unrest, and especially the looting and things that are taking place. And is it there a direct correlation to the pandemic? Of course, there's a lot that's happening because of the pandemic, loss of jobs, loss of resources, and it's just creating this atmosphere is just ripe for little things to ignite and create so much that we have to deal with. However, we know that, when we are able to get back and running, I think this is a great opportunity in terms of what we do and what we focus on, and what's important about our sport. We try to inspire individuals to connect with and give back to their communities, and we are looking for that opportunity. We know from having the event, getting people involved, the work that we do does positively impact the communities, and we know that by enabling us to have those live events to, again, just like I mentioned in terms of what got me excited and interested in the sport, people coming together, helping one another. You don't know who they are, but you're supporting them to help them achieve something that not many people can say they will have done or will ever do. And as well as all the great good that the marathon does, or our sport does, in terms of elevating, awareness for the nonprofits, raising funds that then can do that great work that impacts and affects our communities in a positive way. So, again, despite everything and that's happening around us, that is continuing to drive us. We know that at one day when we come out at the other end, that we'll be able to do that again. In the interim, we are focused and try to create different experiences, and not that it'll replace it, but we will be working on a virtual experience. So those that wanted to or had signed up to run will still be able to take part in the marathon distance, excuse me, as well as other distances for the week. So now we're able to do something to bring the community in, and as you probably heard in different conversations and um, uh, interviews, there's so many new runners to the sport, or people that have been active based on their current conditions. People that haven't been able to go to the gym that just got off the couch and started running for the first time, or reintroduced to running. So we're looking at the opportunities, like how do we get them involved? How do we get them comfortable, especially when we get back to normal, into the sport? So I think some of the virtual opportunities that we're looking at is giving us the ability, or will enable us to cast a greater net, a wider net, to pull them in and hopefully get comfortable and introduce them to our sport. So then we can, move forward and have them take part, and hopefully be part of this the running movement, this almost like running pandemic boom in the future. So those are the things that we're focused on. And as you know, and you probably heard, it's we've at the very beginning of the pandemic really focused on what was happening, getting through it, reacting to it. Now we're having a little bit longer range focus. What happens in 2021, of course, but even further in terms of 2022, when we really feel that things hopefully will be getting back to normal. And I'd say they'll be back to normal. It's going to take, I feel, a couple, 2, 3 years to really get back up to speed, to really feel that we were or will be at a place where we were back in 2019.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think many challenges to go, but I personally as well feel there's going to be a bright future, and I'm making the comparisons to the running boom of the 70s and 80s, and hopefully those kind of people are going to want to come and be parts of our event. But in the meantime, plenty of challenges to overcome, and I'd like to hear some of you've obviously overcome some immense challenges over the last few months, and I'm sure one of those must have been just like this never-ending finish line. When are we going to be able to make a decision? When are we going to be able to make an announcement? But can you maybe share with us a couple of the biggest challenges that you've faced during this period, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, at the very beginning. To make decisions in order to cancel, you can imagine what's involved with that. You go through in terms of the mitigation analysis and the gap analysis and the mitigation strategies. And at the end of the day, you just realize it's just not safe. Not safe for the participants, clearly, not safe for the volunteers, staff, or the communities that we would impact. So to get to that point to make that decision took a couple really good months to take a look at the work and and what came out of it and the recommendation and moving forward. So that was a lot of work to get to that point. And I think then the other part is like when you get to the point to make a decision, that's one thing, and it was a lot of work to get to that moment to make the decision to get all your partners aligned to be able to take that step with them, and make that first move. Now that one of the hardest parts was to make that decision, then came all the additional hard work. It's like, how do you unravel, especially for the marathon, how do you unpack and unravel the event, from a business aspect, and working with your partners and working with your contractors and vendors. And you just knew, the impact that that would have on them, and their employees. So it was really, I mean, emotionally draining, physically exhausting, but important to do as well for the health and wellness of the event. So that was, you go through these different stages to lead up in terms of making the decision, what happens during that period when you do, and all the work that has to go into the contracts. And then at the same time, it's like now trying to create the experience and still working with the participants to ensure that we can give them something to create that consistency, to have the virtual event. Because again, if we're able to do something, create something for the charities, at least they can hopefully convince their runners, their fundraisers, keep fundraising, keep that community going, to enable them to raise funds for those respective organizations to continue to do the great work. And as you can imagine, in everything's kind of like, typically you like to have start something, end something, start something, end something. It works really well together. Um, but everything is like tied together. In addition to working on the virtual events and experiences, now we're working on 2021. And what does that look like next year? And we still don't know, and it's still very murky. And now you're coming up with different scenarios. We've learned a lot to get us to where we are today, and then just coming up with, what is that plan and outlook going to be for next year? What is that registration going to be look like next year? It's all those what if scenarios, those different models, the different forecasts that are really influencing in terms of what these events potentially would look like. And if you can imagine the impact that has on our staff, and it's very emotional for them. It's just, and I think the hard work for us, and our focus has been on our team and keeping them together, which we've been extremely fortunate to be able to do without impact to the large majority of them. And a lot of it's just been, giving and having the resources to enable them to work remotely, giving them the tools, the applications to do so, as well as, having the ability to do that work from where they are, and just staying focused. And the biggest part, as you know, is the communication aspect, and communicating to them continuously from the beginning of the week through the week, end of the week. And that's really been an important part of what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, and that was obviously requires a huge amount of leadership, and that's something I always love to get a sense of is, maybe important for some of the viewers, or interesting for some of the viewers, to get a sense of how big your team is. And then, some of the leadership principles you've applied during that period, are they old tried and tested things that you've done, or are there some new things that you've learned from a leadership perspective in this time?
From a leadership standpoint, I think it's like anything, anything that we've learned over time is being reapplied. What's old is new again. However, the way that we do it and deliver it is new, and taking advantage of the technology that's available, with the video conferencing, which has really enabled us to get more engaged and having these types of conversations where you can see, your team member have those in one-on-ones and really have a good conversation. It's interesting that you say that. It's we would have these conference calls, or you pick up the phone, and it was easy to have that dialogue. And now when you pick up the phone to have a conference call without the video, it seems so awkward, and you
Strange.
can't
Yeah.
see the other person, and you can't pause. You don't see if you want to, like, someone wants to raise their hand and like be able to chime in. And now it's like very awkward not to have the video part of it. So that's been an important communication tool for us. And at first, excuse me, we would typically do an in-person, headline meeting at the beginning of the week, and then we'd go about our daily business and different things that take place. And now we've really had to have those intentional, headline meeting at the beginning of the week to set the tone. We would have the important one-on-ones with our direct reports and encourage everyone and the people that they manage to do the same. We'd have different leadership meetings and created different ones to really ensure that we're focused and working with smaller groups on a continual basis. So we'd have our executive leadership team, we'd have a director team, we'd have another leadership group, and then we instituted at the weekly basis an end of week town hall. But it's more in terms of providing all the updates to the greater group, just to make sure that we keep them informed of what's happening. So, for instance, today, this Friday, we'll have a town hall, 30 minutes, just talking about the big things that have taken place, and as well as recognizing the team that have really been in the trenches working hard. And some of them just haven't obviously seen their partners and their team members. And if you don't work in a certain department, you might not know or hear a lot of the work that they're doing and the great stuff that's coming out from that. So it gives us that opportunity to recognize other individuals, other teams, and as well as keeping people informed of what's happening. Now we've gone to a cadence where, at the very beginning, it was important to do things on a weekly basis. Now we've been able to go bi-weekly and stretch that out a little bit, knowing that we have this rhythm and routine going, and people are really having more engaged conversation on a needed basis. But again, from a leadership standpoint, that's really something that we had to push and encourage other people to do, lead by that example. And I think, as you can imagine, the other thing that you realize as a leader, we really need to make sure that people now are managing their meetings and being more efficient with them, going in and ensuring that people have a purpose. And because where I think we're getting just this Zoom or video conference fatigue, and just really making sure that people are having these engaging meetings for the right reason versus just saying, hi, how's it going? And just making sure they're really effective. So we've been really focused on that from a team standpoint, from that, the culture. And that's one thing that we have been missing, is having the culture in the office, especially when we're working remotely. It's been really hard to keep that going, and it was an important part for us to focus on.
Yeah, no, that's some great insight. How many in the total team, Mike? I mean, I know it obviously scales when it's marathon time, but how many in your core full-time team?
We have 34 full-time members.
Yeah,
And it's interesting when you say that, because a lot of the technology, you're not able to see everyone sitting around and on screen at the same time. So it doesn't feel like you have 34, and you forget that. So it's
yeah.
interesting when you ask that. It's like, God, sometimes the groups that you are connected with on a daily basis, I see one or two people or
Mm,
maybe six people at a time. But unfortunately, it's like you don't get a chance to see people, collected as a group of like all 34 of us. So
yeah.
you tend to forget that, and it's hard to visualize.
Yeah, yeah. Mike, I always love to end on an inspiring story. I'm sure you've seen so much inspirational. Your story is inspiring, 13-year-old starting, running along and keeping going. But is there something inspiring that you'd like to leave people with?
I think what's the amazing thing, like we just talked about, and what's keeping us going, and we know that there's going to be an end in sight. We know we will come out at the end of the tunnel, and we all will be producing, especially those that are in endurance sports, live events again. And it's important in terms of understanding what we do create. Again, it's our job to create the stage and the platform for those runners to perform on. It's their goal, it's their achievement, and we look forward to that. I think you've seen, and when you're at that finish line, just what that finish line does to people emotionally, and the emotion that is evoked at the finish. You see people coming across the line that are crying, that are laughing, that are mad. And it's amazing, in just that humanity and the spirit that creates. You see people that are running hand in hand that don't even know each other. You're seeing the volunteers that are supporting people that they don't even know, spectators that just endlessly cheering for individuals from all walks of life. And that's the part that's truly inspiring overall, every day, every event, and really just luring us out. And we see that at the end of the tunnel. It's like there's the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's that finish line that we see that's just ensuring that it's drawing us there, just knowing that one day we will create that and create that stage once again.
Fantastic. Yeah, and create a huge impact. Wonderful, Mike. So great to talk to you. Thank you for making the time. And hopefully, it's not too long before I'm standing next to you at a finish line.
Well, I hope that's the case, and that will be soon. So, thank you for this opportunity. Great to see you here on the Zoom call, and I look forward to the next opportunity.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. Bye.
All right.